Don't you lads try anything. You might get me, but first I'll blast him right in the belly.
For decades, Randolph Scott kept his private life locked away. Silent, polished, untouchable. But after his death, a single handwritten note was discovered, and what it revealed shattered the carefully built image he left behind. Fans who read it didn't just cry. They questioned everything they thought they knew about the Hollywood icon. What secret did Scott carry to his grave? And why did he choose now to let it be known? Join us as we reveal the heartbreaking final message that left millions in tears. More than friends, Randolph Scott is often remembered as the Hollywood star who retired at 64 with a fortune rumored to be around $100 million from smart investments in real estate, oil, gas, and stocks. But behind the wealth and fame, Scott's private life was a different story. Photos he left behind hinted at a tough life during the 1930s and a lonely, painful love life that would surprise many of his fans today. In early 1933, Cary Grant gave a light interview to a fan magazine about his favorite seafood. It was a regular segment meant for housewives, focused on celebrity recipes. But instead of sharing his own advice, Grant pointed to someone else. "If you want a real expert on shellfish, talk to Scotty," he said. "He loves lobsters, crabs, shrimp, you name it." The magazine took note. That fall, Grant and Scott, both young actors still climbing the ladder, were interviewed after a golf game while having lunch in Los Angeles. Scott ordered the food. The magazine treated it like a fun glimpse into the lives of two close friends. But something about it stood out. Grant and Scott were roommates, unusually close, and their playful back and forth sounded more like a couple than casual friends. Scott proudly said, "I even got Cary to love shellfish as much as I do." Fan magazines at the time were controlled by film studios. They used these stories to shape how the public saw their stars. But this piece was different. Two men, living together, joking about food and home life. It was rare for that time. And it didn't go unnoticed. Even back then, some people questioned if there was more to their relationship. Columnist Hedda Hopper, known for stirring trouble, often targeted Grant. She once hinted that he wasn't normal, later writing, "Whom does he think he is fooling?" Her words showed the gossip and bias of the time and added fuel to the quiet rumors surrounding Grant and Scott's bond. Destined to meet. Cary Grant was still new to Hollywood in 1932 when he met Randolph Scott. A few years earlier, he was known as Archie Leach, a poor kid from England with a rough past. His father drank too much. His mother was sent away to a mental hospital when he was a child, and there was never enough money. At 15, he ran off to chase a life on stage. He learned to survive doing circus acts, walking tight ropes, and performing in clubs. He later landed on Broadway and eventually made it to Hollywood, where everything changed. In New York, Archie had met Ori Kelly, a clever and stylish Australian working in theater and fashion. They lived together for years in a cramped apartment in Greenwich Village. Ori Kelly never openly said they were a couple, but his memoir hints at a close and complicated bond. He described Archie as charming but troubled, often sick, messy, and still figuring himself out. Once, after a bad night out, Archie even hit him. His clothes were loud and awkward, far from the sharp image he'd later become famous for. Archie left New York in 1931. 10 days after arriving in Los Angeles, he signed with Paramount and changed his name to Cary Grant. In just a few months, he met Randolph Scott on the studio lot. They were working on different movies, but hit it off quickly. Some say Ori Kelly was the one who told Cary to move in with Scott. Either way, by the end of the year, the two men were living together, first in an apartment, then in a small home in Beverly Hills. Sharing a place was common for actors trying to save money, but this setup would become something different. Scott, unlike Grant, had come from wealth. He was calm, clean-cut, and polished, with a deep Southern accent and classic good looks. He had already been in films and knew how to handle himself in Hollywood. Grant, still rough around the edges, was trying to lose his English sound and fit in. He didn't dress well at first, and some in the industry didn't take him seriously. One director even said Grant looked odd and wore scarves to cover his neck. "He's no gentleman," he once joked. But Scott didn't care. He helped Grant find his place. They went to parties together, met famous people, and became a regular sight at Hollywood events. The Big Secret. In the Prohibition era, Los Angeles had a hidden nightlife that flourished underground, especially for the queer community. Gay clubs and speakeasies popped up across the city, even though same-sex relationships could still land you in jail. A 1933 Hollywood column casually mentioned places like BBBB's Cellar, where the boys dress up like girls, and Jimmy's Backyard, where the girls dress up like boys. These places drew a mix of people, different genders, different desires, and stayed alive despite police raids and harsh laws. Among the crowd, according to journalist Jenny Hamel, were big names like Cary Grant, Marlene Dietrich, and others who moved freely in this world behind closed doors. This was the scene Grant and Randolph Scott belonged to. They didn't exactly hide. In fact, biographer Mark Elliott wrote that they sometimes went to costume parties dressed as women. In 1933, Photoplay magazine ran a gossip note that hinted at their closeness. They go every place together and even share the same house. That same spring, Grant and Scott did their first major joint interview. By then, their bond had deepened. They'd moved out of their small shared apartment and into a private Spanish-style home near Griffith Park, a quiet place with 8 rooms and a view of the whole city. The house had a fireplace, a piano, and bold art on the walls. Scott bought kitchen tools when he felt like playing homemaker. Grant had just picked up a new Packard Roadster. Scott's Cadillac was always parked beside it. The writer who visited them, Ben Maddox, was himself a closeted gay journalist, according to film historian William J. Mann. His piece for Silver Screen was filled with subtle nods. He described their first meal together in the new house, noting their opposite natures. "Cary is the gay, impetuous one. Randy is serious, cautious," he wrote. "Cary is intense. Randy is calm." These descriptions carried quiet signals for those who knew how to read them. By then, Archie Leach, the lost English boy Grant once was gone. Cary Grant had fully taken over, laughing beside Scott in their Los Feliz home, living a life of quiet rhythm and soft luxury. Elliott wrote that Grant picked their clothes for public outings, while Scott handled home decor and meals. This wasn't just comfort, it was order, something Grant had never known in his chaotic early years. Scott, said a friend, helped him become the kind of man he wanted to be. Their life together looked almost too steady, too warm. Naturally, rumors followed, but the two stayed visible, posing for home life spreads in magazines, cooking side by side in published photo shoots. Then, in 1934, Grant suddenly married actress Virginia Cherrill. Later, he told a friend that the studio had pressured him into it. It wasn't love. It was a way to quiet the whispers. That same year, Hollywood adopted the Hays Code, a strict set of rules that banned any trace of homosexuality on screen or in the industry. The message to queer actors was clear: fall in line or disappear. Built to collapse. Just 11 days into Cary Grant's marriage to Virginia Cherrill, they were already doing press, posing as the perfect couple at the Algonquin Hotel. But the spotlight quickly turned to something else. Randolph Scott was still living with them. "Randy Scott has been constantly with us. The three of us get along so well," Cheryl told Silver Screen, clearly not thrilled. She eventually insisted on living alone with Grant, but that didn't last long. Grant, no longer the lively charmer the magazine had profiled a year earlier, awkwardly defended the setup. "The place is so big, Randy couldn't possibly be in our way." Then he asked the reporter if it all seemed strange. When she said no, he looked relieved. Not long after, the trio left their shared home in Los Feliz. Grant and Cheryl moved into a luxury apartment. Scott got the unit next door. Modern Screen later caught up with Scott, not at his place, but in Grant's dressing room on the Paramount lot, which he had picked as the interview spot. The reporter described how relaxed Scott was there, like he still belonged. He said he missed the everyday life he'd shared with Grant, the meals, the planning, the comfort. He admitted he didn't want to get in the way of Grant's marriage. But when asked about the wedding, he grew quiet, staring at his hands. The reporter noted a heavy feeling in the room, a sense of something lost. The headline didn't hold back. "Is he jealous of the girl who now comes first in his pal's affections?" By late 1934, things were already falling apart. Friends noticed the change in Grant. Ori Kelly said the fun had drained from him. The marriage failed fast. By 1935, the divorce was final, and Grant moved back in with Scott. They settled into a quiet beach house in Santa Monica. The bungalow sat right on the coast, with a clear view of the Pacific. Everything in the place seemed white. White sand, white blinds, white flowers that Grant picked out himself, and their energetic white dog, Archibald, who always found ways to make a mess. Screenland visited in 1936 and described the home like it was straight out of a design magazine. The reporter called it one of the happiest houses they'd ever seen. They disagreed on small things. Grant liked meat. Scott preferred vegetables. One drank tea, the other coffee. They both enjoyed artichokes, but only Grant ate them cold. Scott had a sweet tooth. Desserts were his thing. On free mornings, they'd put on their swim trunks, dash into the surf, and run down the beach together. Both actors were still under contract with Paramount, and to the studio, all this painted a tidy image. Two handsome bachelors sharing a house, still available in the eyes of fans. The old excuse, that they were just saving money, no longer held up. Their life was what it was, deeply familiar, quiet, and hard to ignore. Later that year, Scott married an old friend, Marion DuPont, but she mostly stayed on the East Coast. The bond between the two men didn't change much, even during the marriage. In a Modern Screen interview, Grant said, "Randy's wife never came between us. In fact, quite the opposite. Women are a remarkable institution." The rebranding Grant hated doing interviews alone. Without Scott nearby, he came off stiff, cold, sometimes even irritated, even when talking to fan magazines. In 1935, Scott told a reporter that Grant would lose sleep and weight if he read something personal in the press. During one interview titled "Heart, Whole, and Handsome," Grant was short and said he wasn't looking for love. But the moment turned odd when Scott barged in, joking, "You've been lounging around while I've been stuck at the studio all day, working hard so you can keep living like this." Photos printed alongside the article didn't help the rumors. They showed Grant and Scott swimming together, eating, and playing with their dog. On the surface, it was just two men sharing a home. But there was a closeness in the images that hinted at more, a kind of everyday intimacy that didn't quite fit Hollywood's bachelor image. The photos were taken by Jerome Zerbe, a young gay photographer who, according to The New Yorker, had relationships with both men. Zerbe said the goal was to respect Hollywood rules while still making the pair look good in the press. He kept notes about wild nights at Ori Kelly's place and long evenings spent with Grant that lasted past 1 or even 3 early in the morning. Scotty Bowers, who later became known for arranging secret meetups for closeted Hollywood stars, also spoke openly about his time with the two men. He claimed they had many nights together, though he described the encounters as more affectionate than sexual. Scott liked to cuddle and talk, he said. He was very gentle. While this private life played out behind closed doors, Grant's career was exploding. He became the charming lead who teased his audience, always looking just out of reach. He played men who understood luxury, clothes, and clever talk, just like the man off-screen in Santa Monica. The fall off Scott's career stayed steady for a while, but never took off the way Grant's did. As Grant's fame grew, the bond between them began to fade. Some say they just drifted apart, saw each other less, argued over their home, and finally let go. But the bigger issue was the time they lived in. Richard Blackwell once said they couldn't act close in public. They couldn't touch, walk side by side, or even speak freely without people watching. Some believe their relationship ended because it couldn't move forward. Biographer Donald Spoto claimed RKO gave Grant a choice: end things with Scott, or lose his contract. Grant chose his career. Still, breakups are rarely that clean. In 1940, Grant and Scott appeared together in My Favorite Wife, a romantic comedy where Irene Dunne plays the woman caught between them. Film critic Pauline Kael noted that Grant didn't seem fully present in the role. In one scene, he looked almost dazed as he watched Scott by the pool in a swimsuit. They filmed at the Huntington Hotel, where crew members were shocked to see the two men check into the same room. Everyone looked at everyone else. It seemed hardly believable, recalled script supervisor Burt Granite. Shortly after, Grant earned his first Oscar nomination for Penny Serenade, a sad film about a crumbling marriage. His performance as a heartbroken man marked a new phase in his career. The cheerful energy he once showed on screen gave way to something darker. He would explore this further in Hitchcock films like Notorious, where his charm masked a sharp edge and emotional distance. By the early 1940s, Grant and Scott had lost touch. In one interview, Scott said they might live together again someday, though the comment came only after the reporter aggressively pushed back against the rumors. The article warned readers not to believe the kind you don't talk to your mother about. By the mid-1940s, their story had quietly ended. What remained was a surprisingly detailed trail of photos, interviews, and shared moments that studios later tried to dismiss as just publicity. But the constant coverage suggested something deeper. Decades later, gossip magazines used similar excuses to explain other close male pairs. Just roommates, just saving money. The pattern was clear. As for Grant, truth and fiction were always mixed together. He was private, polished, and often hard to read. Scott married Patricia Stillman in 1944 and stayed with her until his death in 1987. Grant married twice in the 1940s alone, and 5 times in total. His only child, Jennifer, was born in 1966. She later wrote that she didn't believe her father was gay, but admitted he may have experimented. Grant's time with Scott came just before a brutal wave of anti-gay persecution in the U.S., known as the Lavender Scare. Still, the rumors never fully faded. In the late 1950s, gossip queen Hedda Hopper claimed he had gone back to the boys. In the 1970s, one of Grant's girlfriends asked him why all his secretaries were gay. In 1980, comedian Chevy Chase called Grant a homo on live TV. Grant sued him for slander and reportedly settled for $1 million. For years, Grant built an image of the ideal movie star: funny, stylish, romantic, while hinting at something more complicated underneath. His story asks hard questions about fame, masculinity, and the limits placed on love. Even now, Hollywood has very few openly gay male leads. Only one has ever been nominated for a Best Actor Oscar. For someone like Grant or Scott, being honest about who they were would have changed everything. Maybe it still would. Years after Chevy Chase's insult on live TV, Maureen Donaldson, a British journalist who once dated Cary Grant, released a book about her time with him in the late 1970s. The book left out one major detail: a moment Grant shared with Bill Royce, Donaldson's co-author and friend, who later became close with Grant too. In 1976, Royce happened to see Randolph Scott. When he told Grant about it, something shifted. Grant was in his 70s by then, no longer acting, and living a quieter life. But the memory of Scott clearly still touched something deep in him. Grant invited Royce over and spoke for hours. For the first time, he opened up about what Scott had meant to him. He said he had fallen hard for Scott early in his career. "Have you ever heard of gravity collapse?" he asked. "Some call it love at first sight. That's what it was for me." He explained that their relationship didn't fit any label. They had both men and women over at their beach house, but Grant admitted he had stronger feelings than Scott did. They tried to close the gap, but it never fully worked. Still, there was intimacy, sometimes clumsy, sometimes tender. "Randy wouldn't have gone that far with me," Grant said, "if he didn't love me in some deep way." He also remembered small things: Scott's sweet tooth, his dislike for bad language, his obsession with golf and money, and his habit of piling every topping possible on a ballpark hot dog. "If they had petunias, he'd use those too," Grant joked. "The hardest part," he said, "was letting Scott go. It broke me to give him up," he told Royce. But even in that pain, Grant had found peace. He said softly, "Our souls touched. What more could I ask for?" What do you think about the hidden relationship between Randolph Scott and Cary Grant? Was it love, friendship, or something in between? And does this change how you see their careers and legacy in Hollywood? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories. And make sure to click the next video showing on your screen. You won't want to miss it.